All right, we got some folks coming in to join us. Welcome, everybody. My name is Matt Stevenson, and I will be your host for today. Welcome to the Underworld Tour. For those of you who may not have been to one of these before, we have literally crisscrossed the globe talking about all that is good and horrible in the world of cybercrime. And I think that's one of the things that we have come to see over the course of time is how much security has shifted from being a protection mechanism against hackers and pranksters and is now much more concerned with a truly organized criminal system the world over. Hence, we go with the Underworld Tour. And I figured before we get too far into it, let's make sure that we've got all the housekeeping things out of the way. Some of the different things, it's going to be best if you're streaming it through your computer. We've got some really good people available for this. So any questions, please submit through the Q&A box. We will make sure that we can get to all of the most relevant ones through the course of the show. If we do not have time or just can't get to it because it's a little too in the weeds, we will definitely make sure that we reach out and get those questions answered. We need to hear from you guys, so make sure if you've got questions, comments, things that you'd prefer if we dig deeper into, if we're going too fast or too slow, let us know, and we'll have some polling questions for you at the end of the show. And then once we are done, there will also be links to this, so you can come back and really just watch it at your leisure, because it is going to be the most exciting thing about cybercrime that you're going to see from us today. And if you've got any questions, if there's anything else that we have not covered, please reach out. You can find us at our webinars at cylance.com. So with no further ado, let's meet your hosts. As I said, my name is Matt Stevenson. I'm part of the senior technology team. To my virtual right, Brian Robeson, also known as DJ Thunder Lizard, the senior director of the security technology team, and he's going to be manning the ones and twos today. Brian, say hello.
Hey, good morning, Matt. Good afternoon, everybody, for joining from Europe. Glad to be here. Thank you very much. And I'll be back on a little bit later. I'll be keeping an eye on Q&A, so if you guys have any questions, try to enter it in, and I'll be back a little bit as we start to turn the records and get going on some cool demos.
All right. And I do hope that we've got some folks from Europe tuning in, because it always makes things more interesting. But as we were saying, talking about how all of this has evolved, and as a security industry that we need to be keeping pace, we need to be outpacing the bad guys. We figure what better way to start than a quote from the unquestioned godfather of all American organized crime, Al Capone. The line is, you can get much farther with a kind word and a gun than you can with a kind word alone. And hold on to that idea for a second. Just noodle on that a little bit, because times have changed, and the gun is not necessarily the optimal tool for the type of crime that you want to commit in order to not have to live a legit life and lead a real world kind of gig. Another good line that we like, this one, we're not so sure if he said it or not, but it was the title of his book. Willie Sutton was John Dillinger's partner and was supposedly once asked in a prison interview, why do you rob banks? And Willie said, well, I rob banks because that's where the money is. So that is another one that I want you to think about, because all of you are the bank, and the data is the money. So when you've got these gangsters coming in, they are going into your network because that's where the value is. And when we say money, it's not just personal information anymore. It's not just credit card or financials. It's anything you've got on your network that is valuable to you, that you would pay to get back. So when we've got the new era of Capone talking about the kind word and a gun, as far as the villains go, you can keep your gun. You give me a good team of hackers, fast internet connection, a Tor browser, I'm going to take your money, I'm going to take your car, and I'm going to leave you in your empty building, and you won't even know that I've been there, because odds are I'm not even in the same country, if the same continent as you. And that's why just guns are passé for this sort of thing. You're not going to do enterprise-level thievery anymore by rounding up a crew and going and hitting a bank hard like you're Robert De Niro in Heat. Now, it would be great if it was just the bad guys that were using these sorts of metaphorical guns, but that's just not the case. For those of you that have been keeping up on the news over the past year, unfortunately, the National Security Agency suffered a data breach. One of their contractors walked out the door with over 70 tools of cyber warfare. And these weren't neat little toys. These were the United States government tools that allegedly that we use. And two of them that you may be familiar with are Double Pulsar and Eternal Blue, and that's the image to the left of the logo. And these tools were something, they wanted to give a test run. And it's the old drug dealer theory. We put these out on the market for free. and you see what the reaction is if people can use these tools. If you use them and you like them, the shadow brokers offered a subscription service where for $21,000 a month, you would get a tool like these that is something that was created for international weapons of cyber warfare, cyber espionage, for the low, low price of $21,000 a month. Now, these are the elements that made up the tool, but you may be a little more familiar with the retail name. Anybody lose a weekend to WannaCry last year? I'm sure none of you did because we're all professionals, but perhaps had a colleague or a friend or a relative. And that's what happened with Double Pulsar and Eternal Blue. That was part of a package that created WannaCry, and it was interesting because it hit on a Friday. And over a 3-day span, it was in over 300,000 machines worldwide in 175 countries. It hit the British healthcare system particularly hard. We ended up doing a trade show about 6 weeks after WannaCry, and 40% of the machines were still down. And when we're talking about this, they weren't necessarily attacking the hospitals because they want to hurt people, but the ancillary damage, we're talking rescheduling surgeries, having to reset and recalibrate machinery that is vital for keeping people alive, and then just inconvenient stuff. Everybody had to reschedule doctor's appointments, prescriptions not getting filled, and it was all because of this WannaCry attack. And the sad thing is, these guys weren't that great at what they did. They built an interesting tool, but in their collection mechanism, they didn't have their back end built out. And as a result, they only made $80,000. Now that sounds, hey, $80,000, it's nice for a weekend's worth of work, but you're in 175 countries, man. You should have a better collection mechanism. And the problem was with that 80 grand, they didn't even see that until late in the year. And we're not sure if it was the thieves who got to it or if someone got in and just cleaned out their Bitcoin wallet. But the problem is their collection mechanism was not as good as their threat mechanism. Now, imagine if you were dealing with someone who actually knows what he's doing. And as much as I would like to tell you that that is a photo of Brian in his leopard print onesie holding a leopard cub, it is not. But it may be a name that you are familiar with. If anybody is familiar with hacker circles, if you have heard of Slavik, and if you don't know Slavik, I'm sure you're familiar with his work. He was the creator of the Game Over Zeus bot. And the Game Over Zeus bot supposedly has been pulling about $100 million a year out of the world economy. And when we talk about organized crime, when we say people who know what they're doing, he may look like a lunatic, but this guy is the head of a Russian organized crime group called the Business Club. And they are structured in a typical pyramid-shaped run from the top down style where he's the founder and CEO, and then reporting up to him, ostensibly, I guess you'd call them VPs of technology, of development, of support, accounting, finance. And it ran all the way down to the point where they had runners in all 11 time zones spread across Russia. And these people went to work in buildings. They got paid by check from the bank with taxes withheld. That's how organized these guys are. And Slavik is such a character that up until pretty recently, he had a large Instagram following. That's one of these pictures. That's where we got it. The last photo that we had of him was in his yacht in the Black Sea. And it was from a security helicopter, and he's waving at them. And the story with this guy is they're not turning him in. And it's not because the rewards aren't out there. Interpol has a $4 million bounty on this guy's head, but he pays his employees so well. There is true loyalty inside his organization. So when we say it's a new fight compared to what we've seen before, this is who the battle is against. And it's part of what we've seen so far, the evolution of everything that we've been fighting as professionals in security for years. In the beginning, the first piece of known malware was a mistake. It was a self-replicating worm on a single machine. It was called the creeper virus. And it was early 70s. It took a while for the first person to think, if it hurts my own machine, I could definitely hurt somebody else. So a few years later, the first person weaponized it and actually sent it into another network and was crippling other people's machines, really just to be a jerk, because at that point, no one had figured out how to monetize it yet. That did take all the way till 1989. And it's odd to say, but that was the birth of what was called the PC AIDS virus. And it was called that because its creator targeted people doing AIDS and HIV research, specifically going after the doctors, the medical labs, people that were doing the funding for it. So worldwide, he sent out a floppy disk to everyone that was on a World Health Organization mailing list that was particular to AIDS and HIV research. And you put the disk in, and it would immediately crypt your machine, and you got a notification that you needed to send a check for $179 to the PC Cyborg Foundation in Panama City, Panama. $179. And so that was the first piece of ransomware that we saw. And now, 30 years later, it's so easy to get this stuff. You don't need a computer science degree. You don't need a team of developers or anything like that. It's probably harder to get in your car and drive down to Best Buy and buy software than it is to just go get some. Now, Brian, we're talking about a lot of money here, man. I mean, you got Game Over Zoo Spots pulling $100 million a year out of the economy. Hell, even that 80 grand sounds pretty good. You're a relatively technical guy.
I don't know if I'm a technical guy, Matt, but I'm definitely on the category of dummies. Well, but yeah, let's go.
You can certainly type. I think that's the key thing that we need at this stage in the development of our ransomware industry.
Yeah, so absolutely. I can use search engines and I can type. So let's go talk about for a few moments. Matt talked about how easy this stuff is to actually get and obtain. And I'm going to talk about a couple of different things that we can utilize here. Basically we're using standard tools of the trade here, where we're using a Tor browser to access some sites. And as Matt said, this is no longer mailing physical floppy disks around. I mean, even though, Matt and one of our other coworkers had a great experience in an elevator just out of DC with a USB stick and handing it to somebody. But, this stuff literally can be obtained by anybody with an internet connection anywhere. And I'll just highlight a couple of sites here very quickly before we go in and actually create some zero-day type stuff. But essentially, here's a site called Ranyan, and this is something that is very active out there today. As you can see here, it's been updated here in January. It continues to be developed. Now, obviously, it says, these products are for educational purposes only, but yes, the real aspect here, Matt. Now, this is an interesting one because if Matt had some money, this tool actually costs a little bit of money to go get, whereas some of these things are actually free. They're actually free to use, and basically the ransomware as a service provider, if you will, simply takes a cut of your profits. But Wait, this one has a couple of different packages.
Fred, did you just coin a phrase? Is that the RSP, the ransomware service provider?
Maybe we could add it to the ransomware as a service, just like Google Drive and other things that are used here.
I like it.
So, I mean, here, if you look at this bottom line package of 1 month access to the C2, your dashboard, ransomware as a service site, costs $120 US. Now, I don't know about any of you, but I know my 6-year-old boy could probably come up with $120 if he wanted to. He could grab an iPad or something and sell it to one of his friends, do something like that. But look at all the cool stuff that you get as part of this tool. You get the ransomware, you get the ability to make it a unique sample, and we'll talk about how that kind of is done in a few moments, but essentially making it unique in the world so that the AV products, the security products that are out there simply don't detect it. You get, they take no fees. So you get 100% of your encryption, victims that are out there. You can disable a lot of things in the system. You can bypass UAC. You can disable the task manager, access to the registry editor. All these kind of cool things are available. So this is one that costs money. It's $120 up to $900 for an annual subscription to basically collect your money and all the cool different things. Another one that I like is called Raspberry. Raspberry, and you can look at and you can see the quality of these sites and how these sites differ depending on how much basically effort they're putting into the tool itself. And you can see here you have access to support. This one you can create multilingual type of outputs. You can target your country of origin or whatever you want to do. And again, we'll go in here, and I've already logged into this tool, and you can see here you've got your command and control center, you've got support, and you can purchase new packages. And again, like Randian, this one gives you the ability to purchase packages as low, and this one's for you, Matt, because you're a plastic member. But basically, $60. It gives you a 1-month subscription for, an encryptor that is compatible from Windows XP to Windows 10. They say guaranteed, 100% of the ransoms paid. You get free support as long as you maintain your active subscription. So, this one even has a lower barrier of entry.
I love that they give it an insulting name at the lowest end because they want to goad you into, dude, at least be bronze. Don't be the plastic guy.
That's right. You've got plastic, bronze, silver, and gold, and then platinum at the high end, right? A 3-year C2 service. So I don't know if I'd spend 3 years because the way the dark web works, these sites come up and go down all the time. All right, now let's talk about something a little different. Now this one actually is relatively new to the world. This one launched in about mid-February, so mid last month. It's a little over a month old right now. And this one is called Gatekeeper, and this is a pretty cool system. Now, this is very similar to some of the older ransomware as a service sites like Satan, some of the other ones that we've shown in the past that are now defunct because, again, it's, dark web and kind of cool stuff. So some of these things kind of come up and down all the time. But basically, this one is a free service, which is the scary part. It has absolutely no barrier of entry whatsoever, except for the very difficult CAPTCHAs sometimes to actually get logged in. And
because we don't want any bots stealing money from the people we're stealing from. We've got to make sure that we keep the thieves out of the ransomware sites.
That's right. We don't want bots in here to do all this cool, fun stuff. So, I mean, again, everything that you do here is you have to enter a CAPTCHA to do anything. But basically, you can enter some information in here. How do you want to get paid? All this other kind of information about it. But you can go over here to Get Program. And you can basically, it's very simple instructions. You set your parameters. You click Compile. Now, they did forget here that you have to enter the CAPTCHA, which is kind of hidden at the bottom. I always mess this part up. But basically, it takes a while, and it compiles a unique sample of malware on their back end for you to download. And so now you can add in all kinds of cool stuff that will basically be launched prior to your malware. You can control the extensions that you want to encrypt, which is very cool. We're going to talk about doing something very targeted here in a moment, but you can see the extensions you can encrypt. And you can also do things like, try to encrypt subnet shares. Run as admin if you want to do that to gain more access to the system. And this is very cool because this is essentially that eternal blue kind of exploit type stuff that Matt was talking about earlier. And you don't have to know how to use that code. You can simply check a checkbox here and turn that feature on, and then go build your sample with that code directly in it. That's what is really scary, is that now that those exploits have actually been weaponized, these guys make it easy to include in your ransomware. Now, because this does take a little while, I did create a sample earlier this morning, or early in the afternoon, UTC, for those friends that are joining over the Atlantic. And so I created a sample a little bit earlier today, and we're going to actually just download that right now. So again, we have to enter in our difficult CAPTCHA. Sometimes these can be difficult, and that will give us access to download our file. So we're going to download our file, and we're going to save it out to our desktop.
And Brian, just
awesome.
Not to beat a dead horse on this, there's what, you ticked 3 boxes and filled in an email address? I mean, it's harder to buy an airline ticket than it is to do what you just did.
Definitely no identification required for this. I mean, basically, here within a few seconds, I've got this cool new EXE that's sitting here on my desktop that I can now use to do something bad with. So now, Matt, one thing I like to do is I like to go back in time. And one thing I want to do is I want to go back to something called Atom. It's also known as Shark, but essentially it represents the granddaddy of all ransomware as a service. Now, this tool was released back in 2015 as part of kind of this new strain of ransomware as a service. But the interesting thing is that the exe builder, this was not a website. You actually downloaded from the website the actual builder code that you could run locally on your system, just like I'm doing here. Now, the command and control for this has been dead for a long time. So it actually doesn't, upload, information to the command and control so it can create your really cool sample, and add its random amount to the decryption price and things like that. But we can still build a sample of this malware, and we can put a decryption price of 0.2 Bitcoin. And the cool thing is, just like with Gatekeeper or Datakeeper, sorry, I keep calling it Gatekeeper, I don't know why, but we can target this and have this, for example, only encrypt PDF files. Or if we want to do JPEGs as well, we can do JPG, whatever. We can put a list in here, but I like this one because let's say I want to target somebody and I want to just go after all their PDFs. And so we can take this and we can build a sample of Adam. And we're going to call this one Matt_Adam.
Man.
All right. So now we're going to come back and look at more of this in detail here in a few moments. Matt's going to go ahead and take the presentation back, but we're going to come back to this in a few moments and we're going to inspect more of this. But the idea here is how easy this stuff is actually to get and create and to do real damage. So Matt, back to you on the presentation.
Hey, look how seamlessly we did that. I got to be honest, you guys, this is a new tool for us. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to pull that off, but we did.
Smooth.
Thank you. While we are talking about evolution, it's worthwhile to talk about where we are as an industry. And I touched on it a little bit, but I think it's fair to say, as security professionals, we need to be better and we need to be faster, because the bad guys are running to market as quickly as they can, and they don't have to deal with things like beta testing and, first available and general available, and is it going to work, and reviews and that sort of thing. If their ransomware doesn't work, who cares? They're just going to go make some more. And if we are not out in front, then we are going to be continued to be stuck with what we have today, which is the stack. And in the beginning, AV worked. Signature-based antivirus was a successful product, just because there wasn't that much going on. I will even say one of the pioneers of our industry, Papa John McAfee, has a quote, something to the effect of, I think you're going to see malware die out within the next 2 to 4 years. That was in 1990. How are we doing on that? And that's the problem, is eventually the malware just caught up and overcame what antivirus was capable of doing. There was too much of it. So some enterprising young sales company comes along and says, well, let's keep that AV. You need it. It's not great, but you need it. And you're going to have to pay for it still. But now let's add an anti-exploit tool, because they're finding new ways to get in and exploit the vulnerabilities in your network in different ways. And between these two things, now you've got a layered approach and you're good. Problem is, within a couple of years, the exploits were coming fast and furious as well. And the anti-exploit company says, now we protect all 12 known ways. And then within 6 months, it was, we protect against all 18 known ways. And it just overwhelmed. The next step, well, let's try sandboxing. Let's look at it from a way we'll put everything inside a protective container, let it blow up, and then we'll make a decision if it's good or bad. Problem with sandboxing is you have to let it execute. And that's what we're trying to get away from. We need to get away from detecting and responding to problems and actually preventing these problems from occurring. Behavioral analysis.
And hey, Matt, as well, there, as you saw on those sites, those tools that they have available have things like sandbox detection, so that the malware will understand that it's actually running in a sandbox, and it will execute benign code until it's released by the sandbox. So, a lot of these tools come with technology to bypass these different layers of technology.
And some of them, it's as simple as a delayed execution. They'll wait as long as it takes. And some of them will sit there for years before they finally pop. And it's the larger point that we're making by illustrating all of these examples. Everything that is in today's stack of security products, the layered approach, you can see the air quotes I just made, it all is post-execution. Even today's new darling product, detect and respond. Not bagging on EDR, it's a solid piece of the puzzle. We actually make one as well. But everything that is in this stack relies on someone being damaged first so the ecosystem can learn and then protect itself. So I think at this point we've got 77 people online. Everybody decide, looking at those names, I'm sure that you're all really nice, caring people. Who are you going to sacrifice your network for so that theirs might live? And that's a position we're in. Again, talking about EDR, it can be a valuable tool, but the way that I look at today's EDR products, it's like you're standing next to the fire chief staring at your flaming house, and he's giving you all of the information on why the fire's that color, why the smoke smells this way, how we prevented it from burning out your entire kitchen, just the living room and the basement. You know, that's all great information, but oh, by the way, my house is still on fire. I would be much happier if I was in a preventative state and I'm standing next to the chief and he's pointing at my neighbor's house, giving me the details of why it's on fire and explaining how all of these preventive steps that we took from my house has kept it from catching fire. Because in the words of the founders of FireEye, and I'm not cracking on these guys, we as an industry need to work together, but today's model makes everyone a sacrificial lamb. And so we're not talking about one sacrificial lamb, we're talking about a flock that is slaughtered in order for the rest of the world to maintain some level of security. And that's what we are desperately looking to move from a reactive state to a preventative state. And we feel like we've got something in place for that sort of thing, but you've got to make sure that it works. Now, Brian, it's at this point that I cleverly segue back to you so we can actually make sure that it works.
All right. So let's switch back. Give me a moment here. All right, so we're going to switch back and we're going to do a few things with the samples that one of them we created today using a nearly 3-year-old tool. And the other one we downloaded from a website that essentially created it for us. Now, one of the things that we want to do as we are developing kind of our company here, and we're going to emulate the business club here, Matt. So we're going to kind of start a business, and our goal is going to be to, gain some money through extortion and ransom. And so we want to see essentially how good the tools that we have available are. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually run these, and we're going to scan these on another tool very commonly used by nefarious characters. It's called NoDistribute, and NoDistribute allows you to scan a file against multiple scan engines, AV products essentially, to see how good the detection rates are. And this is a cool tool because it's utilized by those nefarious characters because it does not submit the results back to the vendors like some of the other tools that are out there. So essentially, if you want to see how your tools react or how your ransomware or whatever you're building is detected by a lot of those AV vendors out there, without them releasing that information back to those vendors, this is a site that kind of does that. Now, it takes a minute for some of the results to come back sometimes. It's kind of I wouldn't call this a dark web tool because we don't have to access it with Tor. It's a regular site, but it's definitely shady. And so sometimes it comes back, sometimes it doesn't. But as you can see here, our data keeper sample that we created first thing this morning, it's an unknown hash because it told us we had to scan it. If I upload this file again, it'll say, do you want to view the previous results? So we know, for example, that this is a unique hash in the system. And you'll be able to see here, down here from the vendors that are able to detect this sample. Now, this is pretty surprising for me, especially that, this tool has been out there for a little over a month creating samples. And there are a few people that have created signatures for it. Most of them are heuristic detection, meaning post-execution, like Matt said before. they're actually watching it try to do something bad, or they're detecting it with a generic signature that could be, detecting anything. But very, very few of these are actually detecting it as data keeper. And, a lot of these engines actually also kind of share the same engine underneath. So 7 out of 39, that is a pretty darn good sample. I think that's something that we could go ahead and, utilize without any modifications. Now, Adam, this is something that should be way more detectable than 23 out of 39. This has been out there for, like I said, the tool existed back in 2015. But again, every time you build a sample of Adam, it's creating a unique new file. And the signature guys are based on knowing that this file exists before they can kind of block it or create a signature for it. So again, it kind of goes to that point that Matt was making earlier, that being in a reactive state of having somebody hit by something before you get hit is kind of the way this stuff is working. Now, as an example here also, I'm going to go grab a copy of, Matt, what's a good one we like to use? Let's say WannaCry, right? WannaCry was, 2017, came out in May. So this is actually a sample that came out day of. And, again, we'll just take WannaCry and throw it up here on this site as well to show that, it's a legitimate kind of thing. Now, this one has been scanned before, again, right? So you can see that it was scanned. This exact sample was scanned about a month ago. Let's go ahead and tell it to scan again so that we get updates, because this site, does the daily update routine that all of us in our enterprises have to do with these signature-based products. So we want to make sure that the result is as of today, not a month ago. So we're going to go ahead and tell it to scan again. Now, the thing I don't like about Adam here is if I were going to use this to, attack my dad's company's PDFs or something like that, 23 out of 39 detections, that's a bit bad. As far as being able to bypass, potential security products inside my victim. So Matt, let's make malware great again. Let's show people how easy it is to actually modify this file so that it gets around significant tools. So again, before I'm not a developer, I'm not a coder, I'm a dummy, right? I'm a dummy guy that's out there, and I'm going to do some Google searches and figure out how to modify malware to bypass AV. Now, one of the tools that I have found in my searching around is something called Aegis-Cryptor. Now, Aegis-Cryptor, another free tool to download, allows you to do things. Basically, what it's going to do is it's going to encrypt our bad code, our malware, into something that looks like a legitimate application. Now, Matt, your Adam sample out here that you built, that doesn't have a very trusting icon on it or anything else. So we want to actually kind of make this more of a chance that my victim is going to double click and be tricked into executing this. So Aegis allows us to do a couple of different things. First off, over here on the right-hand side, you see a lot of those anti-security features that we were talking about before, where you can, get around sandboxes, or you can delay the execution, as Matt said before. So maybe you want to delay this, 45 seconds or something like that, or maybe you want to delay it 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, something like that. So the benign code is going to execute, and it's going to start a timer. And then when that timer expires, that's when it's going to execute the bad code. So think about an internal employee who's leaving, executes this with a 30-day, delay on a server someplace, and 30 days after he leaves, boom, all of a sudden the files get encrypted or whatever bad's going to happen. So very simple to use tool. Again, when we do our live shows, when Matt and I do our live shows, it's really fun because we actually pull people up out of the audience and have them do all of these steps. Again, it doesn't take any intelligence, really. And I'm a perfect example of that. I'm not an intelligent being. So if I can do this, anybody can do this. So we point it to our original sample. our Matt Adamware. And now this is the piece that allows us to kind of mask our bad code inside good code. And they give you some free ones. And we've also created a demo stub of our own. But notice this file, was created a little while ago. Actually, this is when it was copied over here, .date created, but date modified. And so we're going to use this one. And this one was built from using Notepad as essentially its exe. Now, you can build a stub very simple by logging in, load an exe file. So if you want Notepad or something else, and then you can save as, and it'll create your .bin file for you. Now, like I said before, I don't like this icon. My grandma's not going to click on this icon, or, my victim is not going to double click on this. So let's change it to something a little more trusting. Matt, let's see. How about we use something, everybody trusts Internet Explorer, right?
Oh, of course.
All right.
Wait,
so
you don't have WebCrawler or Netscape in there?
Maybe. Oh, how about an old, one that I like to use is an old AOL icon. Those are cool too.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Now we want to add the icon to the file. And, again, a lot of these tools are built by non-native English speakers. And you can see here, if after crypt been detected, please try without icon or change other icons. So obviously it gives you kind of an idea of, where these things might be created or built. Now, we're going to scramble our encryption key a few times. We're going to scramble our mutex a few times. We're just going to leave all of these other settings alone. For example, we don't want to check the anti-VM feature because we're running in a VM, and that'll stop the malware from actually running. And so we're going to go ahead and click Protect. Now, Matt, I promise that I, personally myself, am not used for illegal purposes, okay?
No, I swear.
Yep. And yes, we're not going to upload this to an antivirus scanning site like VirusTotal, VirusScan, or Jotty, because those sites do.
I love the two-factor authentication on that. I promise I won't. I mean, I really promise I won't to these ones.
Yeah, to these ones specifically, because these ones specifically share your result with other vendors. All right, let's see here. Let's do, we're going to call this one Fun Times IE, and we'll save this one to our desktop. Okay. Now, as you can see, Matt, we've got our new sample of Fun Times IE sitting out here. It has a cool Internet Explorer icon. All that kind of stuff is good. Now, let's also double check and see if we can make this 23 out of 39, if we can make that any better. So we're going to go to our friend here, No Distribute again. We're going to upload our Fun Times IE, and we're going to scan file. Now, also notice back here, our WannaCry scan has finished, and it was detected by a respectable 30 out of 38 engines that ran. And that's pretty good, but I'm still surprised of the vendors on here that still miss, a nearly 1-year-old sample of WannaCry.
There's some familiar names on there.
Yep. Okay. Fun Times has finished, and now we are only detected by 1 out of 39. And as you can see here, the one that did detect it was Kaspersky. Cool guys, but detected it with a heuristic post-detonation signature, which means potentially, depending on your malware that you're running, your system may be compromised already. Again, back to that sacrificial lamb kind of standpoint. Okay, so now there's one more thing that we want to do in our kind of QA cycle, if you will, here, Matt. We've validated that we have some samples that can bypass AV. The one thing that we do want to do is we want to actually test these samples. We want to make sure that we are actually dealing with a program that is going to do what we asked it to do. Now remember, we built our Atom sample to encrypt, sorry, not decrypt, to focus on only PDFs. And as you can see here, I've got my desktop with a few files on it. Like any good sales guy, I've got my sales contract here. I've got my resume nice and hot and ready to be sent off, because those of you who have been around sales, you got to keep those things hot and warm. And if we open up these files, make sure that they're legitimate PDFs, they are. This is a copy of my 2016 Federal 1040 that was filed with the US government, and they love it because I send them in blank. Cool stuff. All right, now, we want to make sure that our sample that we created, and we're going to focus on fun times because fun times is what we're going to be actually using here on this system to, again, we were targeting PDFs only. So if this works, we execute it, and sure enough, looks like those files change, and we get our kind of traditional, ransomware type pop-up. That's not good, right? So, look at that. It just changed the extension. Okay, well, let's go back and change it back to PDF. Our icon's back. Oh my gosh, thank God, our file's back. Let's open that up. It's scrambled. It is encrypted. Okay, so we now know that we have a legitimate sample of ransomware that is actually capable of doing what we told it to do, which is encrypting PDFs. So Matt, I like this sample. This is a good sample. It bypasses AV, and it actually works on the Windows 7 64-bit system here that we are testing it on. Matt, should we see what Cylance does about these things?
Well, yeah, I mean, if we make something that nobody else recognizes, I just pulled
Okay. All right.
Sorry, my first technical glitch. What happened? I accidentally pulled my microphone cable out. So yes, let's test.
You're getting too active there, Matt. Awesome.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so let's switch over to a system here that has Cylance on it. And I have this interesting ping up here going to the internet in the upper right-hand corner, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our system off of the internet. I'm going to change its default route so that it can't talk to the internet. And I do that because it's very important to realize that Cylance does not require cloud connectivity or internet connectivity to make its decisions whether bad code is attempting to run on your endpoint. And this is a very key point because a lot of products today rely primarily or extremely heavily on your machine having internet connectivity so that it can call out and check to these sites like VirusTotal and things like that and kind of crowdsource information about a file you're attempting to execute. But as the internet has become, ubiquitous everywhere, you can get it in coffee shops, you can get it in airlines, you can get it in every place like that, but it's still not something that I would want to rely on 100% to make my decisions for me, being there, being active, being able to communicate and get results back as fast as possible. So I like taking the system offline to highlight the fact that our artificial intelligence works without cloud connection. In fact, the brain sits on the computer and makes decisions completely autonomous by itself. All right, so let's go grab our samples. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and grab all of these samples and drag them and put them on our desktop of our Cylance system. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to execute fun times just like we did on our victim. Let's just double click. Oh, hey, look at that. What happened here? It says I don't have access to the file. And what that is Cylance has actually stepped in pre-execution and taken that file away from the execution process, and therefore me, the user, because I tried to execute it, has actually taken that away. And in a few moments here, it's going to go ahead and quarantine and remove the files. But we can try our other sample, our original MAT software that we created, right? Again, they're completely taken away from the system, and Cylance doesn't recognize that it's offline yet, but it's going to take a few moments for it to do it. And then we're going to leave DataKeeper and we're going to leave WannaCry sitting out here on the desktop because Cylance also has a feature called File Watcher, which essentially has kind of queued these files up for scanning in a low, slow scan kind of in the background. But, I don't want to wait for it. So let's say we try to execute our WannaCry sample, right? Again, here, taken away from us, and it's eventually going to go away here in a few minutes once Cylance realizes that it's offline and it's not able to contact. It's going to take all these files away. Now, Matt, there's something really cool about this system besides not being connected to the internet. And what that is that this system is actually using one of our very, very first versions of AI and ML produced software. This was released back in 2015. And there's, this is an interesting point that I have here, is that this is using an artificial intelligence brain developed before any of these samples of malware, and you can start seeing them disappearing now from their quarantine, before any of these samples were known to the human race, before they were seen in the wild for the first time, before they were known to the human race. And we can actually go and we can look in our system and see the actual date of this infinity model. This is the actual math model itself. And we're using a version of the math model from October of 2015. This is over 2 years old, detecting malware that essentially we just created today. And let's make sure it takes out this data keeper sample too. Sure enough, it did. So that's the point that I want to make here, Matt. You talked about sacrificial lambs before. You talked about post-execution detections and behavioral analysis. That stuff isn't required with Cylance, with the basic engine. It stops the bad code from running without ever having to see it before, and it does it pre-execution, and it does it without an internet connection. And with that, Matt, I'm going to hand it back over to you to talk a little bit more about how customers can actually do these kind of tests for themselves.
And that's something that we can't stress too much how important, oh, come on, I was so proud. There we go. Can't stress how important it is that you do this kind of testing. We've got a couple of really interesting people affiliated with Cylance. One, Chad Skipper, is our VP of testing, and his partner, Carl Gottlieb, have developed a book called Next Generation Anti-Malware Testing for Dummies. And this is methodologies that they have both developed separately and then eventually started working together for testing your security solutions. This is what we do internally. It's what Carl has developed for his company, which you can find him at testmyav.org. Also, both of these guys very active socially, whether it's blogging, doing media, whatever, but you can definitely find both of them all over the internet talking about this. And you need to know that what you purchased worked. And so in this book, they lay out their independent methodologies. This isn't anything about selling Cylance. This is about making sure what you've already paid for is doing what you paid for it to do. So you can find this at threatmatrix.cylance.com. You can find it at testmyav.com or both of these guys on Twitter. But there's hot links to download the PDF for Next Gen Testing for Dummies. Highly recommended. This is certainly not the only way for you to test your solutions, but it's a great place to start and make sure that what you've got in place is doing what it's supposed to do. Because otherwise, you could get on this slide. And this is good news for anybody. Now, we're dating ourselves a little bit because most of this stuff happened in last spring and summertime, but Disney got hit pretty hard before Pirates of the Caribbean 5 was released. Someone got in and got a hold of a finished 4K copy, and in one of the dumber moves, threatened Disney. Disney did not pay the ransom. These guys released it onto the BitTorrent scene, and I'm pretty sure they were never heard from again. Personally, I would rather start a land war with Russia than attack Disney with their third highest grossing IP, but that's just me. Some other ones, Orange is the New Black, rather than going directly at the production facility, they went to a contracted editing house that had finished 11 of the 13 episodes of last season. The only ones that were missing were the first and final episodes because they didn't have the credits on it, but everything else was full. They threatened to release it onto BitTorrent. Netflix and the production house said no. The entire season was out 4 weeks before it debuted. And then the HBO breach that we've heard more and more about, a little bit old school stuff, getting hold of shows like Ballers or Room 104. Game of Thrones, a little different because security is so tight on that show. They were releasing scripts and personal information on the cast. So if you want to call the Khaleesi, you could get her phone number or even drop by her house, which when you talk about security and unsafety, it's a whole lot of different things. But this is what we say, where they're not just stealing money. They're stealing access. They're stealing exclusivity. And those are damaging in different ways that can be harder to quantify and to recover from. And that's why we say we need to be in a preventive state. We don't want to be reacting to things once they've happened. And with this, I'd love to tell you that it's just the product. The product does a pretty good job, but you've got to add some people around that. And this is where what we've got going on at Cylance, we will get you to that state of prevention as close as anybody in the industry. Anybody tells you they're going to be 100% is lying to you. But if you've got the right combination of the people and the process and the technology, that's how we can move you to prevention. And this is a bunch of different ways. When our consulting team gets involved, if you have been breached, we will come in and do the compromise assessment, tell you what has happened. Our IR teams are the ones who will go in and fix the issue and then put you in a preventive state once we have remediated the damage. You may be familiar with their work with the Office of Personnel Management breach. That was 21 million records, and it was the Cylance services team that came in and solved that problem. We've talked a lot about Cylance Protect. That's the preventative mechanism. That's the technology that we can put in place. We mentioned Optics, which is our EDR tool. This is something that can help you be aware of everything that's going on in your network and see if there has been an incident, exactly what happened, and give you a deep dive on that. And then the monitoring system. This is quarterly compromise assessments. We will bring our team in to sit down with your team and give you a 360 overview of what's happening inside your network, recommendations on what to do to stay in this state or how to fix any problems that might be. And this is brand new. This is our new baby that's not quite proud to announce because it's been out there a bit, but Home Edition. It would be great if everybody did their work at work and then lived their home life at home, but we know that's just not the case. And a lot of people are working on personal machines at home. So we have a new product that is the same technology that you're using inside the enterprise for these people to put on their home machines to make sure that you are going to be protected when they are moving data back and forth between personal machines and work machines. Because again, this is another slide you don't want to be on. You don't want to get this famous. We talked a little bit about HBO, the Office of Personnel Management. United Airlines got whacked huge, and we've seen the news about Anthem, about Uber and Equifax. I mean, if you think about it, if you do any traveling, odds are you've been affected by almost every one of these breaches. Now, the Red Flex is the only one that we've had anybody be happy about. This was a traffic camera system in Australia that got breached. And as a result, the Australian government had to throw out an entire quarter's worth of traffic violations from the cameras because there was reasonable doubt to challenge them in court. So that's the only data breach that people celebrated and were happy about. And with that, we are coming to a close. A couple of sites that you want to make sure that you can get information on what we're doing. Threatmatrix.cylance.com is the home for everything. That's where you can find our videos, white papers, all kinds of news that's posting throughout the week. Also, links to the Insecurity podcast. Make sure you're looking for us on Twitter. You can find us at Cylance Inc. and Cylance Insider. You can find me at PacMet73. Looks like we got a couple of questions that have popped up here.
Yeah, Matt, I'll go ahead and take some of the questions while we start the poll too. We want to make sure that you guys kind of give us feedback. So while you guys are filling out this poll, I'm going to go ahead and address some of the questions that have come up. Now, there's a couple of folks who asked some questions around, can Cylance protect and prevent against things like injecting bad code into valid processes that are running in memory? Can Cylance protect against fileless attacks like PowerShell or VBScript kind of based attacks, or even something that is not malware based? And so the answer is absolutely yes. What we demonstrated today was the basic execution engine, the pre-execution engine that is built in built from artificial intelligence and ML. Many other features and layers of the product. Cylance itself is a multi-layered product, so it does protect against fileless type of attacks like through scripting, remote execution with things like PsExec. It has the ability to detect illegal and bad things in memory with its anti-exploitation technique. It does a very good job against tools like interpreter sessions and things like that we show. Now, on that note, I do want to plug an event that I'm doing tomorrow with our co-founder, Stuart McClure, and it's a companion webinar to the Hacking Exposed webinar that we did here a couple of weeks ago. And tomorrow we're doing Cylance versus Hacking Exposed. And tomorrow, in the demonstrations that I'm doing tomorrow, we are mostly using fileless type of attacks and things like that, and not, traditional kind of executable malware. Now, executable malware still represents the absolute vast majority of the way these attacks get into customers. And even if you start from a quote, fileless attack, your goal is still going to be to download some sort of executable backdoor, rat, Trojan, whatever it's going to be, it's still going to be there. So that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. If you want to go see that, we don't have a slide for that here, but if you go to cylance.com and click on the events tab, you can register for that Hacking Exposed webinar tomorrow, where we're going to show Cylance defending against the Hacking Exposed techniques that we talked about here a couple of weeks ago. And that other Hacking Exposed webinar is also available for review. You can watch the recording of that. So there's other questions coming in that are good, like can we get Home Edition if the company doesn't buy Cylance? So what we have right now, and this will be available shortly for everybody, but right now, if a company buys Cylance to deploy inside their enterprise, they have two options with Home Edition. They can buy it on your behalf, which is kind of cool, because then it kind of becomes like a benefit, an HR benefit, almost like a sports club membership or something like that. And when you get that license from your company, you get to install that onto 10 machines of your choice. You can install it on grandma's machine, mom's machine, your kid's machine. You get 10 licenses for both Windows and Mac OS to install Cylance. Now, if your company does not purchase Home Edition for you as a benefit, we now have the ability for you to actually self-purchase that. If your company does own it on the enterprise side, you can, as an employee of that company, purchase the software directly yourself. And that works very similar to like, an employee discount program, essentially, from like Dell or Apple or Microsoft, those kind of things. And so, yes, another question, yes, this recording, we are recording this webinar. It will be available for download for you to share with your coworkers shortly after this, probably within about a day. And let's go ahead and take a look at the, I guess we're not going to review the polls on here, but Matt, I'm going to hand it back over to you to take us through close.
Well, that's about it. A couple of questions that we will get to you. Adam and Kaufman, we are not avoiding you on these, but we want to make sure we get you the right answers for what you're looking for. Then also, we have in development, and this one's coming, we don't have a day for yet, but the consumer edition is something to keep an eye out for with regard to protecting the home machines. We are going to be doing another live broadcast of this today for our friends on the West Coast. Brian, I believe that's 1 o'clock Pacific time.
I'm in Mountain Time today, so I don't remember what time it is, but it is later this afternoon. It's again, if you want to, invite your coworkers, whatever, to see that one live this afternoon. Every show is a little different, so depending on how Matt and my day go today, we might be tired or we might be beat up, but we are going to do this live again. Again, it's available cylance.com. Click on the events, and they can register for that and see that live later today.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of doing stuff on the dark web. You never know, some stuff may not even be there anymore, or there might be something entirely new. So again, make sure that you're following us on Twitter at Cylance Inc. and at Cylance Insider. Any questions, anything you're looking for as far as materials go, the website is threatmatrix.cylance.com. Brian Robinson, thank you very much. My name is Matt Stevenson, and we will see you guys, I guess, we'll see you all at Brian's thing tomorrow, because it's going to be pretty awesome.